I do understand that Clubhouse is for iOS only, and
Yes,
but then 97% of I think India uses Android.
Android,
So
correct.
do we for the young podcasters out there, do we have to feel guilty about not having our podcast on Apple Podcast, or is it okay to get your subscribers regionally from other podcast
Platforms.
platforms?
All right, very good question. Because had you asked me this 3 years ago, I would have been like Apple Podcast is Bible, right? Because there was nothing else. Spotify was just
Yeah,
entering the market. Audible had not even entered the market. JioSaavn did not exist in podcast. Ghana was not then podcast. We don't have Kuku FM. We didn't have Khabri. We didn't have a lot of platforms. Today, there's so many, right? So three
correct.
years back, I will tell you a very funny experience. Also, is mentioned in my book. But I registered for this Apple podcasting as soon as my first episode was ready in People Who Matter. I applied to it through my RSS feed to Apple, and that time it was a big deal. Apple was rejecting a lot of non-US based podcasts. At least that's what I came to know. Unless your
Okay.
quality is okay, because they had a huge problem with people not following sound, uh, you know, uh,
Hmm.
sound editing and sound requirements, which make
Hmm.
a very decent Apple podcast. I don't blame them at all. If I was in their space, I would want people to hear good stuff on my
Hmm.
platform instead of
Hmm.
anything and everything, right? And
Correct.
that also kind of shapes the podcaster to get better at their game. If I
Yeah.
was at level 1, I would like to be level 15, because Apple would then let me come in, and that improves my game as a podcaster. I always
Yeah.
look at negative criticism or rules and regulations like this. I always think of, okay, why is it there? Okay, is it going to help me improve? Great. If I can get there, then good for me as well. Like, I mean,
Correct.
I know it sounds snooty. It really sounds snooty when you think of Apple as a brand. I mean, I'm guilty of having Apple products and I'm a huge endorser of Apple, but I understand from a population
Hmm.
standpoint, making something exclusive to iOS makes it very elitist and very snooty.
Hmm.
However, it kind of helps you up your game as well if you look at it from that way. It's all a perspective change. So 3 years back, when I woke up one morning, and this was after I submitted to Apple, it used to take at least 7 to 11 days to get okayed by Apple. That's the amount of
Nice.
time it took. Okay.
Okay.
And it may or may not happen. And if Apple doesn't take it up, then there are very
Hmm.
few options left for you to put your podcast. There was only Google Podcast left. YouTube,
Correct.
you can put it as a static podcast with just one image going, and people hopefully listening to that one thing. Nobody listens to anything on YouTube. They watch things, right? So your
Yeah.
chances are very less. So it was very
Hmm.
important Apple said yes to your podcast, because then through Apple
Hmm.
you will get recasted in other places like Overcast, Stitcher, and those things which were in US.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
7 days later, I would periodically just check my work mails, and I would go and check my podcast mails. And there I saw this Apple acceptance, and I squealed. I squealed like I got into some college or something. I was like, oh my God. And my entire staff floor was like, what's wrong with her? Why is she behaving like this? And it was in the middle of a work office. It was in the middle of a financially heavy setup. And I was like jumping up and squealing, saying, Apple Podcast got mine. Apple Podcast said, okay to mine. And they're like, okay, theek thanks. We're on calls. Please keep it low. And I'm like, you don't share my joy, but you don't know what a big deal this is. But it was a big deal. So that time, Apple
Hmm.
Podcast was a huge thing. Today, like you rightly pointed out, 97% have Android phones, and nothing wrong with it. So obviously, you have to go to platforms which are conducive to your recording devices. People are recording in different things. They're editing in Audacity. They're editing in Adobe Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro for Apple people. So there are
Hmm.
all kinds of different editing softwares as well. So whatever is conducive for your editing software to share it with, please go ahead. I always say there is always a listener for every single podcast. You don't have to aim for 2 million. It happens. Sometimes it happens. It's like a random video going viral.
Yeah.
So it's like that. So, I mean, I'm not saying this is that. It took me 3 years
Hmm.
to get here. So it's a lot of hard work, sweat, moonlighting as a podcaster. I did a lot of that. But I'm just
Hmm.
saying, if you are a podcaster, start with only because of passion. Don't start because of anything else. Because like
Hmm.
you have to come every Saturday and put out a show out there. You have to
Yeah.
sacrifice yours. So you're inviting a guest only one Saturday of their life, but this is every Saturday of your life. So you have to be committed. You have to be consistent as a podcaster. If you can't do that every time you have promised your people that there's a show coming out, there's
Hmm.
really no point being a podcaster, is what I would say. So if you have a platform which is conducive to your device and your software that you're using, please go ahead and use it. Now there is really no difference between this platform and that platform. Apple used to be
Hmm.
the gold standard. Somewhere I feel maybe I'm an older school of podcaster now. It's just been 3 years, but I've become an old school myself. So I mean, for me, it become gold standard. And Apple rated
Mm.
my podcast as 5 on 5 within the first 1 month of release. We just put up 2 episodes. We only used to do, thank you, thank you. I'm very proud of that. All the other awards as a CEO I get, it's cool. Thank you for that. But this is like hard work. It's like
Yeah.
it comes from a very deep place. So when they gave me a 5 on 5 in 1 month of podcasting, that
That's
was
good.
my real validation that I'm a podcaster. Like my content is good. People are listening, not just in India, but in mature podcasting markets. That was
Mm.
very